Since Christine O'Donnell was chosen as the Republican Party's Senate nominee from Delaware last week, that has provided some competition for Sharon Engel as the face of the Republican class of 2010 for this year's elections, as the personification of the post-Bush, post-McCain Republican Party and its very quotable beliefs. But Sharon Engel isn't taking this challenge to her media primacy lying down. In an effort maybe to keep the magic alive, Sharon Engel traveled to Utah this weekend to take part in an event sponsored by the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society, of course, famous for being kicked out of respectable conservative politics in the 1960s by William F. Buckley and Company because they didn't want how crazy the John Birchers were to be conflated with the rest of conservatives. The John Birch Society, also famous for contending that President Eisenhower, yes, Ike, was not only a communist but an active agent of the Soviet Union, secretly controlled by his brother. The John Birch Society, famous for leading the charge against putting fluoride in drinking water because it was a secret mind control plot. So Sharon Engel this weekend went to a John Birch Society event in Utah and told the assembled crowd, quote, "This is mainstream America." The John Birch Society and the fluoride. Again, this is mainstream America, quoting Sharon Engel there. The John Birch Society is not mainstream America. It may be mainstream Republican politics right now. Sharon Engel is, in fact, opposed to fluoride. But mainstream America, the John Birch Society, no. No, 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 no. Do you believe that President Eisenhower was a Soviet agent? You don't? Then no. No, okay? No. Joining us now for the interview is Glenn Greenwald, attorney, author, and blogger for Salon.com. Glenn, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Great to see you, Rachel.
Is the whole idea of what is mainstream, what makes a person electable, is it in flux? Has the political center moved very far to the right this year?
I'm really unpersuaded by that claim. I certainly understand the view and don't doubt the view. The claim that this new crop of Tea Party candidates is quite radical and extremist. I mean, no rational person could doubt that. But the reason why I don't think it's significantly more, or certainly radically more radical than prior generations of Republican leaders is because to say that really, I think, kind of obscures, even sort of trivializes how radical and extremist prior Republican leaders were. I mean, if you look, for example, at the last decade, we had George Bush and Dick Cheney starting an aggressive war that killed 100,000 people at least, and instituting a worldwide torture regime and claiming all sorts of powers that were lawless and tyrannical. And before that, probably the most odious extremist in America, Newt Gingrich, was the leader of the Republican Party throughout the 1990s. He was Speaker of the House. And before that, you had Reagan radicals. Ronald Reagan was elected on a platform of eliminating whole federal agencies like the Department of Education. He brought with him Jim Watt and Ed Meese and tried to put Robert Bork on the Supreme Court. So is this current crop of candidates radical and extremists? Absolutely. But are they significantly more so than prior Republicans? I don't think so.
When we see, though, like, for example, the fight over Don't Ask, Don't Tell today, one of the other issues with that was the DREAM Act. So this DREAM Act is an immigration measure. The last time, one of the things that I pointed out in talking about Republican hypocrisy on that today is that it was Orrin Hatch and Bob Bennett of Utah who tried to put the DREAM Act on the defense authorization bill the last time around. The idea that Republicans would do that now, that Orrin Hatch wouldn't be in huge trouble if he tried to do that now. Senator Bob Bennett already turfed out. They've clearly taken some sort of turn to the right just within the last decade, haven't they?
Well, I mean, again, I think, that's sort of relative. I mean, if you look back to the 1990s, for example, there were leaders of the Republican Party who actually thought that Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton had Vince Foster murdered, in the case of Hillary, because she was carrying on a secret affair with him, and they were calling for special prosecutors, and they impeached a two-time highly popular elected president over a very petty sex scandal. And they were talking about all sorts of very extremist acts in terms of religious conservatism. Jesse Helms was the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, threatened Bill Clinton that he better not go on military bases lest he be assassinated. So is it the case that since Barack Obama has been elected, the obstructionism has been the kind of theme of the Republicans? Absolutely. But the Republicans were almost as much in lockstep during the Bush years when they were supporting all of those extremist and radical policies with very little dissent.
Glenn, another race that you have been writing about is Russ Feingold's race, facing a very uphill battle against a very conservative Republican challenger named Ron Johnson. I know you interviewed Senator Feingold recently. Why do you think that he is so important to Democratic politics right now?
Well, the irony of Senator Feingold is that he's in real danger because of this enthusiasm gap, and yet Senator Feingold's entire career has been driven by political courage and conviction, the lack of which on the part of the Democratic Party generally is why there's an enthusiasm gap in the first place. And it would be a really bitter irony if the Democratic Party's inability to convince its own voters that it's willing to fight for what they believe in sweeps out of the Senate an individual who has spent years, really decades, fighting for progressive values, often at the risk of his own political standing. I mean, he's from a purple state and yet has taken some of the most courageous positions that the Democratic Party has offered in the last 2 decades.
Let me also ask you one last question briefly on Larry Summers, widely seen as the architect of the Obama administration's economic policies. Announced today that he's leaving at the end of the year. Do you have any reaction to that?
Well, I guess you could say better late than never, and that would be the most complimentary thing. I mean, this is obviously long overdue. I mean, Larry Summers, by all accounts, was really the architect of the deregulation policies in the 90s that led to Wall Street's ability to run rampant, and that caused the financial crisis in the first place. He never should have been in that position. Clearly, his policies advising President Obama have been a failure on most levels, and I think that it certainly can only get better and not worse, whoever it is who ends up replacing him.
Glenn Greenwald of Salon.com, always interesting and provocative to talk to you. We get so much mail when we have you on the show. It's such a pleasure.
I know you love mail, so I'm glad to help with that.
Thanks a lot, Glenn. Great to see you.